So, back when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, I used to sleep over at my grandparents' house a lot. But this one particular time in January brings back some scary memories. My dad and I ran into our house while my mom and little brother waited in the car. He told me to go get what I wanted for when I stayed over while he was on a phone call with a customer. I only need one thing to take with me, and that was my favorite stuffed animal, Woof Woof, that I've had since I was maybe 1. Anyways, I was bored and looked out the kitchen window into our backyard and just waved, because why the hell not? Kids do the weirdest things. However, the creepy part sets in when I see a hand with a black glove on wave back from behind the tree. So my natural instinct is to get my dad, but he just told me to cut tugging on his pant leg. Well, as luck would have it, we forgot to arm the alarm system, and we went out for the rest of the night until they dropped me off for the weekend at my grandparents'. Maybe 20 minutes go by and we get a phone call from my parents saying that our house got broken into. We were all upset because it was just after the holidays, so it really sucked. But the strange part about the whole experience was that whoever broke into the house targeted certain rooms. My parents' room, the living room, my dad's office, and the laundry room, of all places. They left the kids' room alone. There were at least 5 or 6 full piggy banks that had some cash and change in them. Till this day, it scares me that it might happen again. I've had only one nightmare that is similar to this memory, but the lesson I learned from this whole mystery wave was to always turn the alarm on. This might not be the scariest story. It might not even be scary, but it creeps me out so much that I try to push it back in the corner of my mind so that I hopefully never remember it again. Occasionally it comes to the surface and it bothers me for a few days. This time I decided to get it out of my system, type it, and share it in the hopes that it will make me feel less anxious. About a year ago, when I was home, chilling with my boyfriend who insisted that we watch some Musical.ly/TikTok cringe compilations. Not really my cup of tea, but there was nothing better to do, so I agreed. A few compilations in, my jaw drops to the ground when I see a video of myself that I have never filmed and that I have absolutely no memory of. In the frame, there was half of my face, exact same eyebrow, eye shape, eye color, residual makeup that I always had at the end of the day, my neck, exact same pajama shirt that I have had for years, my weird, sloppy hair color, my bed sheets, my pillowcase, even the lighting in the room was the same. I freeze. I hope that my boyfriend won't notice. I deny it in my head and I wait for it all to be over. Although he didn't say anything, he laughed nervously and I think he was a bit confused too. We have never spoken about it. I was too spooked to acknowledge it. Over the next few days I tried to convince myself that it was just someone who looked similar to me. The truth is, I have my doubts. I never went back to search for the video. I'm sure I wouldn't even be able to find it. Although it confused me then, a year later I am genuinely scared of whatever coincidence/glitch in the matrix/paranormal phenomenon that was. Now, I will be forever scared of seeing someone who looks like me. I get goosebumps when I see a face or hair color similar to mine. It is often said that seeing your doppelganger means you will die soon, or that you will go through something tragic. I don't believe in this stuff, but a month after seeing my doppelganger, I attempted suicide and hit rock bottom in many aspects of my life. There is no moral conclusion to this story, so if you wanted one, welcome to the club. So I've been to this area camping a few times, and in the past I've always camped at the campgrounds. In the last few years, my current girlfriend actually prefers roughing it, so we make it a point to camp in the middle of nowhere without anybody around. When we go on camping trips, we usually do multi-day overlanding 4x4 style, so we stay in a different place almost every night, where most people don't go. This brings me to this first night of our 5-day camping trip, 4th of July weekend, 2019. This particular night was one of the weirdest camping experiences I've ever had in my 30 plus years of camping. And I really didn't know how weird it was until I arrived home, but I'll get to that later. So I had found this spot a few miles from the organized campground a few years ago, and I just put it in my memory bank. It's pretty easy to find because it's not far off the main dirt road, and I can tell it was usually used during the hunting season. When we camp, we always bring our dog, a mini American Shepherd. Most people know them as a mini Aussie. She usually runs around exploring, but this afternoon she just stayed near us the whole time. I just thought she didn't feel good from the 3-hour-long car ride. As the sun went down, we started a fire, ate some burgers. I was smoking a tobacco pipe, and we were just looking at the stars. Around 9 p.m. is when things first got weird. We heard this whooping noise that I've never heard in the woods before, probably a couple 100 yards away. My first thought was an elk, but then I told myself that isn't the sound an elk makes, so my natural train of thought goes to, well, maybe it's an animal I've never heard before. About 10 minutes later, we heard this really loud bang, and my initial reaction was a gunshot from my hunter. I have a lot of experience with all types of firearms, so I knew that it wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't hunting season, and you can only hunt during daylight hours. The only way I can describe it was like someone hitting a tin roof or metal sheet with a sledgehammer one time, about 100 yards away. I knew there wasn't any structures within at least a couple of miles, so by this point I'm getting weirded out. My girlfriend is just sitting there enjoying the fire, not really worried about anything. Meanwhile, me and the dog were on high alert. A few minutes later, I see a white light behind my girlfriend in the distance, but when I looked directly at it, I couldn't see it. If I looked to the side, I could see it out of my peripheral vision. I told my girlfriend to turn around, and when she looked towards it, it disappeared. When she faced the fire, it came back. We did this a couple of times, and then it didn't come back. Probably 30 seconds to a minute total. She never saw anything, and I only saw what I can only describe as a blurry white light with no discernible shape. At this point, I'm ready for bed, and we crawled into the safety of our Jeep and locked ourselves in. We actually fell asleep fairly quickly. The rest of the night was uneventful, and so was the rest of our 5-day trip. When I woke up in the morning, the dog was in a much better mood, and I walked towards where I saw the light. It was directly in my line of sight from the campfire. Through the trees out to about 100 yards from our camp and about 8 feet off the ground. The ground didn't look disturbed at all around the area, and I couldn't even guess what it was and why I couldn't look directly at it without blurry vision. When we arrived home, I was wanting to watch the new Missing 411 movie, The Hunted. As we watched it and got to the audio recordings done by the hunters at 1:16:01, my blood ran cold and my girlfriend looked at me. and said that's what we heard. We only heard the whoops 3 or 4 times, that was it. I've been a Missing 411 fan for years. I don't have any of the books yet though. So I'm always extra cautious in the woods, especially if I have my children around me. From the missing map, as far as I can tell, this isn't a spot where people usually go missing. Anyway, that is my honest to God experience. I was completely sober, and I'm not the type to go looking for paranormal stuff, nor have I ever experienced or heard anything like that before, or since. And yes, I've been camping since. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it when I think about it. There is a reason I don't trust people. One day I was walking down the road to see my mother. A silver Civic pulled up next to me. I responded very poorly to strangers normally, but that day I made an exception. A mistake. I recognized the face. I remember seeing him from time to time, every other day or so. He lived a few blocks from me in an apartment complex. Seemed like a normal 40-something-year-old male. He seemed nice. He asked if I needed a ride. It was so hot. I hesitated at first, but decided to enter the car, because it was so hot out. Everything seemed fine. He asked me what I did for a living. He said he worked on cars. He said he had seen me around the neighborhood, and I said that I had seen him. Everything was fine. I told him my stop was a few blocks up. Then his face went blank. I knew something was off immediately. He passed the street I told him to stop at, didn't even slow down. I asked him to stop. He kept going, his face cold and blank. I asked him to stop. He kept going. His face, cold and blank, turned to me. His eyes ping-ponging back and forth between me and the road. He started spewing disturbing and fragmented sentences. He said I would never have to work again, that he would treat me like a king, that he would take care of me and I would never need to leave him. I told him to stop the car. He told me I just needed to be quiet and listen. I noticed that he carried a belt clip foldable knife when I entered the car. He had one hand on the wheel, the other passing erratically between his inner thigh and the center armrest. I yelled again for him to stop the car. His hand lunged over and clutched the top of my pants at the button. He tried to twist the button off. When it did not work, he tucked his hand halfway down my pants. I grabbed the wheel. We were going maybe 25 or 30. I pulled hard to the right and the car pulled over the curb on a steep incline hill past the sidewalk and slammed to a stop. He reached towards his knife, maybe his crotch, but I reacted. 2 hard hits stunned him. In a rage, I tried to break his head through the side of the window. It only bounced. I jumped out of the car and just sprinted until I couldn't any longer. I couldn't process what had happened. My hand was bleeding. I was full of adrenaline. I made it to my mother's. I got my ride. There's a reason I don't trust people. A few weeks ago, on a Saturday night, I let my dog Riley into the backyard. He was out there for about 10 minutes, and so I opened the back door to call him inside. He didn't come inside, which was weird because he usually did, so I closed the back door and waited. After about 5 or so minutes, I opened the back door to let him in.
Riley!
I called. No response.
Riley, come inside! Night-night!
Again, no response. This is where things get weird. I whistled for him, and then from the other side of the yard, I heard someone whistle back. The exact same whistle I had whistled. What the fuck? I muttered under my breath. I thought it was just my imagination, so I whistled again. And again, the person whistled back. I shut the door and locked it. I went to my grandparents' bedroom and looked out the window. I went back to the kitchen where the back door was and flipped the porch light on. I went back to the bedroom and looked out the window. Again, there was nothing. After that, I decided to go in the living room and tell my grandparents what happened. My grandpa told me to grab a flashlight in Riley's leash and check it out. He said the whistling was probably just the neighbors across the alley. I grabbed a flashlight and Riley's leash and turned the porch light off because I was afraid of what I might see with it on. So afraid that I didn't even plan to use the flashlight. I am a small and skinny 16-year-old male, and I am not that good at fighting. As soon as I stepped out into the cold, dark night, I wished I would have gone to my room and grabbed my baseball bat. Slowly, I made my descent of the porch steps. I know I am sounding like a little wuss in this story, but it was scary. One time last year, in the middle of the night, I heard someone slam the cellar door shut. That scared me so bad, but I was even more scared now. I stopped on the second to last step and looked around the yard. I finally got enough courage to call out,
Riley?
Then, from right behind me, I heard a soft voice whisper, Riley. I turned to see a face peering at me from under the porch. I couldn't even scream. The face was peering at me with a crazed face, looked like a crackhead, which is common where I live. I ran up a few stairs, kicked the dude in the face through the spaces between them so he couldn't grab at me, and ran back inside. I told my grandpa what happened, and he got his gun and came back out with me. We searched the whole yard. No sign of the crazy guy, nor my dog Riley. The back gate was wide open, and there was blood on the stair that the man's face was at. The blood was from me kicking him. The cops were called, of course. I explained everything to them. After the cops spoke to me, they left. Haven't heard anything from them since. The next morning we found Riley standing in a random driveway, which was good. My guess as to what happened is the crazy man was already in my yard when I let Riley out. And he was on some other side of the yard where Riley didn't notice him. Riley must have discovered the gate was open and left to wander around. It was a pretty terrifying experience, and I'm glad that my dog wasn't hurt.